When I told my girlfriend, I might lose my job, but I'll get back on my feet. She looked at me with a smirk that didn't belong on someone who claimed to love me. Then maybe I need someone who can support my lifestyle, she said, her voice sharp, almost casual. That sentence hit me harder than the news I'd lost my job. It was the moment something inside me broke, and something else started to grow in its place. I stood there, speechless, holding the letter from my company, my chest tight. I thought she'd tell me it would be okay, that we'd figure it out together. Instead, she looked at me like I was already a failure. Her tone had no warmth, no understanding, just disappointment. Evan, she added, I can't go back to cheap restaurants or staying home every weekend. You know that's not me. I didn't know how to answer. For 3 years, I'd believed we were building something real. We shared an apartment filled with memories, movie nights, lazy Sundays, the small joys of everyday life. But in that moment, I realized all of it was only valuable to her when it came wrapped in comfort and money. That night, she ordered takeout from a fancy restaurant, one I could no longer afford. She didn't ask if I wanted anything. She just sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, eating shrimp pasta like nothing had changed. I sat at the small kitchen table, staring at my laptop, trying to update my resume, my mind blank. Every keystroke felt heavier, like my worth was tied to every word I typed. The silence between us stretched. I tried to talk to her again, to explain that I had savings, that I'd find something new soon. She just said, You always say that, Evan. But I can't live on promises. I went to bed early that night, pretending to sleep while she stayed up watching TV. I could hear her phone buzzing, laughter in her voice, a softness that hadn't been there for me in weeks. My stomach twisted. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe she already had a backup plan. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed about walking through my old office, only to find my desk gone, my name erased. I woke up before sunrise, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was disappearing piece by piece. In the morning, Sierra was already dressed to go out. She didn't kiss me goodbye like she used to. She just said, I'll be late tonight. No explanation, no look back. As the door closed, I sat there in the quiet apartment we once called home, realizing the truth. She didn't want love. She wanted comfort, luxury, validation. And I was no longer enough. That was the morning everything changed. I didn't know how or when, but I promised myself I wouldn't stay broken. I would rebuild, and one day, she'd see what she lost. After that day, Sierra started changing fast. She stopped talking to me the way she used to. Meals together turned into her ordering for one, eating while scrolling on her phone. The small gestures that once felt like love were gone. No more hugs when I came home. No more how was your day. She just seemed irritated by my presence. One evening, I asked if she wanted to watch a movie together. She looked up from her phone and said, Evan, I'm not in the mood for cheap distractions. Her words were sharp, and I could feel the distance growing between us. She started dressing differently too, always ready to go somewhere, even at night. When I asked where she was going, she'd say, out with clients, or networking. I wanted to believe her, but deep down, something didn't feel right. One night, I woke up thirsty and went to the kitchen for water. That's when I heard her voice through the slightly open balcony door. She was on the phone, laughing softly. No, I'm done dating broke men, she said. Her tone was proud, almost smug. I froze. It felt like someone had punched me in the chest. I didn't move until I heard her hang up and come back inside. I walked quietly back to bed, pretending to sleep, but my hands were shaking under the blanket. The next few days were heavy. I tried to act normal, tried to talk to her, but she barely looked at me. She started coming home later and later, always smelling of strong cologne that wasn't mine. She'd tell me she was busy with clients, but her lipstick would be fresh, and her smile, a little too bright. One afternoon, she left her phone on the couch while showering. I didn't mean to snoop, but when it buzzed, the screen lit up with a message. Dinner tonight, 8 p.m. I got us the table you like. The name under it read Colt Renner. My heart dropped. I opened her messages and saw restaurant confirmations, compliments, pictures of expensive food. Colt drove a Tesla and worked in real estate. I remembered her mentioning him once, saying he had real ambition. That night, I packed a small bag. I didn't argue, didn't wait for her to come home. I couldn't stay in that apartment knowing she was out with someone else, pretending nothing was wrong. I left my key on the kitchen counter next to a note that said only, "Take care, Sierra." I didn't have the energy for more words. When I closed the door behind me, I felt empty, but also lighter. The pain was real, but so was a quiet determination forming inside me. I knew I had lost her long before that night, but I also knew something else. I wasn't going to chase her or prove myself to her. I would rebuild my life, silently. One day, she'd see me again, and I wouldn't be the man she left behind. The weeks after leaving Sierra felt quiet and strange. The apartment I moved into was small, with a single window that looked out onto a busy street. I spent most of my days job hunting, sending out resumes, and trying to stay focused. Some nights, I lay awake wondering how everything had fallen apart so fast. But each morning, I reminded myself that standing still wouldn't change anything. After a few weeks, I got a call from a small design firm called Burke Studio. The owner, Natalie Burke, had seen my old portfolio online. When I walked into her office for the interview, she didn't waste time on small talk. She looked straight at me and said, "Your designs have personality. You just need direction." I didn't know it then, but that sentence would mark the start of everything new in my life. Natalie was tough but fair. She noticed every detail, every crooked line, every unfinished idea. She didn't let me settle for good enough. At first, her feedback stung, but soon I realized she believed in me more than I did. "You have something raw," she said once after a late-night project review. But raw talent needs courage to show itself. The company was small, only 5 of us, but everyone worked like we were building something big. We didn't have fancy offices or big budgets, but we had ideas. Real ones. Natalie gave me a chance to lead a small project designing affordable housing that blended beauty with sustainability. I poured everything into it, my sleepless nights, my frustration, my need to prove I could create something lasting. When we presented the project, something unexpected happened. The investors didn't just like it, they wanted to fund it. They said it was fresh, different, and full of heart. The success of that design brought attention to the firm. More clients started calling. More doors opened. Months passed quickly. I started leading more projects, mentoring junior designers, and handling presentations myself. Natalie pushed me to take ownership of my work, even when I doubted myself. "You've earned your place," she told me during one late meeting. Her words felt different from Sierra's. They carried belief, not judgment. By the end of the year, Natalie called me into her office. I thought I was in trouble again for overworking or skipping lunch, but instead, she smiled and said, "You're not my employee anymore, Evan. You're my partner." I didn't know what to say. The man who had once been told he wasn't enough was now co-owner of a thriving design company. My income had tripled, but more than that, I felt alive again. I finally understood that success wasn't about showing off. It was about self-respect, patience, and purpose. That night, I walked home through the city lights, feeling calm. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't chasing anyone's approval. I was simply proud of the man I was becoming. Sierra's life looked perfect from the outside at first. Expensive dinners, weekend trips, shiny gifts. Colt made sure people noticed them wherever they went. He liked attention, and Sierra liked being part of it. For a while, she convinced herself she had finally found what she wanted, a man who could give her everything. But it didn't take long for the shine to fade. Colt was charming in public but cold when the lights were off. He spoke to her like she was decoration, not a person. "You're here to make me look good," he'd say when she questioned his tone. Whenever she tried to share her ideas or talk about her work, he laughed and said, "You're cute when you pretend to be serious." The first time he said that, she brushed it off. The 5th time, she felt something inside her shrink. She tried to keep her freelance styling business going, but Colt hated when she worked too much. "You don't need to stress about clients anymore," he told her, scrolling through his phone. "I can take care of things." But he didn't take care of her. He took care of control. He wanted her around when he needed her, to dress up, to smile beside him, to make him look successful. The moment she spoke up, he reminded her who paid the bills. Sierra began losing her regular clients because she missed appointments and arrived late to shoots. The same people who once admired her creativity now whispered about her attitude. Her phone, once full of bookings, started going silent. Every missed call felt heavier. Every empty day made her more aware of what she'd given up. One night, Colt came home late, reeking of perfume that wasn't hers. When she asked where he'd been, he laughed. "Don't start acting like a jealous girlfriend. You're not exactly irreplaceable." The words hit her like a slap. She tried to argue, but he cut her off with a bored glance and said, "You're supposed to be my trophy, Sierra. Not my problem." Days turned into weeks, and Colt grew colder. He stopped inviting her to events. He'd leave for business dinners and come home with lipstick on his collar. Sierra knew what it meant, but she didn't have the strength to confront him. She was too tired, too dependent, and too afraid to admit she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. When she finally decided to leave, she realized she had almost nothing of her own. The apartment lease was in his name. Her savings were gone. Her car, which he had helped her finance, was repossessed after missed payments. And Colt, he had already moved on. She saw the truth one morning when she went to collect her things. A new woman opened the door, wearing one of Sierra's old necklaces. Colt appeared behind her, smiling casually. "You should have left weeks ago," he said. Sierra walked away that day with a small suitcase and a heart full of regret. The man she'd chosen for comfort had left her with nothing but emptiness. For the first time, she realized what she'd truly lost wasn't money. It was respect, love, and herself. 2 years passed, and Evan's life had completely changed. His company had grown from a small studio into a respected name in modern architecture. Clients now reached out from across the state, drawn to his creative yet practical designs. He worked harder than ever, but the difference was clear. He was working for himself, not for anyone's approval. One afternoon, Natalie walked into his office with a new project file. "Big opportunity," she said, setting it on his desk. "Downtown Commercial Plaza renovation. Funded by Renner Development." The name didn't mean much at first. Evan opened the file and started reading the proposal details. But then he saw it, Colt Renner. The same man who had once taken everything from him without even knowing it. Evan sat back in his chair, silent for a moment. He wasn't angry. The old pain was gone, replaced by something quieter, control. "Let's do it," he said finally. "We'll go in confident." The meeting was scheduled for the following week. When Evan walked into the tall glass building, he noticed the polished marble floors, the expensive art on the walls, the same kind of luxury Sierra had once chased. The conference room was already full when he entered. He greeted the board members with a calm smile, setting his presentation folder on the table. Then he saw her. Sierra. She was sitting near the end of the table, beside Colt, typing notes on a laptop. For a moment, she didn't look up. Her hair was shorter now, her clothes more formal, but her eyes looked tired. When she finally lifted her head and saw Evan, her face froze. Her fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. Colt was speaking to one of the investors and didn't notice at first. Evan stayed composed, giving a polite nod in Sierra's direction before taking his seat. His heart beat steady. He wasn't the man she'd left, and that calmness gave him power. When the presentation began, Evan spoke clearly and confidently. He explained his design ideas with precision, showing plans for an eco-friendly plaza with open green spaces and modern details. The room was silent except for his voice and the soft hum of the projector. Halfway through, Colt leaned back and studied him, finally realizing who he was. "Wait," Colt said, a hint of surprise in his tone. "Evan Mercer, right?" Evan met his eyes and smiled politely. "That's right. Nice to see you again." Colt nodded slowly, trying to hide his discomfort. Sierra's eyes stayed fixed on Evan the entire time, her expression a mix of shock and something else, regret. She could see how confident he'd become, how sure he was of himself. There was no trace of the man she once dismissed. When the meeting ended, the board members praised his vision. Colt forced a handshake, his smile tight. Sierra stayed quiet, her hands trembling slightly as she packed her notes. Evan thanked everyone and walked out, his voice steady, his posture tall. He didn't need revenge. His success had already spoken for him. The second meeting took place a week later, and this time the room was full of senior executives. Colt walked in first, confident as ever, shaking hands and flashing his practiced smile. Sierra followed behind him with a stack of documents, keeping her eyes down. When Evan entered, the air shifted slightly. He looked calm, dressed in a simple suit, carrying only his laptop and a folder. He didn't need to prove anything. His work spoke for itself. As the presentation began, Evan projected the new 3D model of the plaza on the screen. The design was clean, smart, and full of character, every detail thought out. His voice was steady as he explained the layout, materials, and environmental plans. The board members nodded along, clearly impressed. Colt, however, wasn't happy with the attention Evan was getting. He leaned forward, interrupting halfway through. That's all very creative, he said. But how exactly do you plan to manage the costs? These sustainable materials aren't cheap. Evan smiled slightly. That's a fair question, he said calmly. We've already secured supplier partnerships that cut the cost by 30%. You'll find the details in Section 5 of your packet. A few people flipped through their documents, nodding as they confirmed what he said. Colt frowned, realizing his attempt to trip Evan up had failed. He tried again, this time pushing about deadlines and logistics. Evan answered every question without hesitation, clear and confident, turning each challenge into an opportunity to show his expertise. By the end of the presentation, the room was filled with quiet admiration. One of the investors said, "This is exactly what we've been looking for. It's modern, efficient, and realistic." Another added, "I've seen a lot of proposals, but this one feels different, like it was designed with purpose." Colt forced a smile, pretending to agree. But everyone could see the shift. The balance of power had changed. The board announced that Evan's firm would lead the entire project. Colt's company would stay involved, but under Evan's coordination. For a moment, no one spoke. Colt's face tightened. Sierra sat frozen beside him, her pen still in her hand. She turned slightly toward Evan, her eyes glistening. He didn't look back. He stayed focused on the discussion, thanking the board members and outlining the next steps. As the meeting ended, people began shaking hands and congratulating him. Colt's handshake was brief, his smile tight and forced. "Looks like we'll be working together," he said through clenched teeth. Evan nodded politely. "I look forward to it." His tone was professional, calm, unshaken. Sierra stood near the door, watching him as he gathered his things. There was no anger in her eyes this time, only the weight of realization. She finally understood what she had thrown away. Evan walked out of the room with quiet dignity. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The man she once thought wasn't enough was now the one she could never reach again. A few days after the meeting, Evan was at his office reviewing blueprints when his assistant buzzed in. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "She says she's from Renner Development, dropping off some documents." Evan didn't think much of it. "Send her in," he replied, still focused on his screen. When the door opened, he looked up and froze for a second. It was Sierra. She stood there holding a brown envelope, her hands trembling slightly. Her hair was neatly styled, but her eyes looked tired, as if sleep hadn't come easy in a long time. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I just came to drop these off," she said softly, placing the envelope on his desk. Evan nodded, motioning for her to sit if she wanted. She hesitated, then sat across from him. The silence stretched between them, heavy but calm. "You've done well, Evan," she said finally. Her voice cracked a little. "You look different." "I've been busy," he said, keeping his tone even. She looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers together. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything. I was young and stupid, and I thought I knew what I wanted." Evan didn't move. He listened, but his face stayed calm. He had played this moment in his head before, all the things he could say, all the ways he could remind her of the pain she caused. But now that she was in front of him, he didn't feel anger. Just distance. "I made mistakes," Sierra continued, her eyes glistening. "Colt wasn't who I thought he was. I kept trying to chase something that didn't even exist. And when I saw you at the meeting," she paused, her voice breaking slightly. "You looked happy. You looked right." Evan leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "People change," he said simply. "Maybe we could talk sometime," she said quickly, forcing a small smile. "Just coffee, maybe? To catch up, or to talk things through." He shook his head lightly, his tone calm but final. "I don't think that's a good idea, Sierra." She blinked, surprised by his composure. "So that's it? After everything?" He met her eyes and said quietly, "I hope you find the lifestyle you're looking for." The words hung in the air, steady and clear. She stared at him, realizing what he meant, that the part of him she once controlled was gone. There was no space left for her in his world anymore. Sierra stood up slowly, her hands clutching her bag. Her face had gone pale. "You really changed," she said softly. Evan gave a small nod. That was the point. She turned and walked out without another word. When the door closed, the room felt quiet again. Evan went back to his work, peaceful in a way he hadn't been in years. The past had finally ended, and this time, it stayed closed. Months passed, and Evan's project began taking shape downtown. The sustainable plaza he had designed turned into one of the most talked-about developments in the city. People came to see how modern design could blend so naturally with green space. News outlets covered the progress, calling it a fresh vision for urban living. For Evan, it was more than just a win. It was proof that all the late nights and quiet sacrifices had been worth it. When the ribbon-cutting ceremony arrived, he stood beside Natalie as reporters asked questions and cameras flashed. He smiled modestly, keeping his answers focused on the team's effort, not his personal success. Still, everyone knew his name. Evan Mercer, they said on TV. The rising architect with heart and vision. He didn't chase fame, but it found him anyway. As the project brought in profit, Evan decided to do something that truly mattered. One evening, he sat in his office looking out at the city lights and thought about how hard it had been when he first started. The struggle, the rejection, the feeling of being invisible, he remembered it all. That's when he made his decision. He set up a scholarship fund for underprivileged architecture students, giving them a chance to study, to create, to dream without limits. It was his quiet way of giving back, a kind of revenge that didn't hurt anyone, only healed what once was broken. Meanwhile, Sierra's world was falling apart again. Colt had become more controlling as his business faced financial trouble. When she showed emotion or tried to speak up, he called her too dramatic and too emotional. Eventually, he told her not to come into the office anymore. "You're a distraction," he said bluntly, handing her a final paycheck and ending whatever was left of their relationship. She moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, living off savings that were quickly running out. Each morning, she scrolled through social media and local news, and Evan's name kept appearing. Photos of him at award ceremonies, shaking hands with city officials, giving short speeches about sustainable architecture. In every picture, he looked calm, confident, and fulfilled. Sierra stared at those photos longer than she wanted to. Each one felt like a mirror showing her everything she had thrown away. The man she once dismissed as not enough had become someone admired and respected by everyone. She remembered the night she told him she needed someone who could support her lifestyle, and the memory made her chest ache. She tried to tell herself she didn't care, but the truth wouldn't leave her alone. Every headline about his success reminded her that she had traded love for comfort, and lost both. Evan never reached out, never gloated, never mentioned her name. His revenge wasn't loud or cruel. It was quiet, graceful, and complete. He didn't destroy her. He simply rose so high that she could no longer reach him. The charity dinner was held in one of the city's grand hotels, its ballroom glowing with soft lights and quiet music. Evan had been invited as a guest of honor for his contribution to the community. The scholarship fund had already helped several students. He arrived in a simple black suit, confident and calm, greeting familiar faces as the evening went on. He didn't care much for the attention, but he knew moments like this were part of his work now. Across the room, Sierra stood near the entrance, clutching her small purse tightly. She hadn't planned on coming, but an old client had offered her a ticket, and curiosity led her there. When she saw Evan among the crowd, smiling, relaxed, surrounded by people who clearly respected him, her heart sank. He looked like a completely different person, but deep down, she knew he was the same man she once turned away. She hesitated, unsure whether to approach him. Part of her wanted to leave before he noticed her, but another part couldn't bear to walk out without saying something. Gathering her courage, she walked across the room slowly, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. When Evan turned and saw her, his expression didn't change much. He looked surprised for a brief second, then polite, distant but not cold. "Evan," she said quietly, her voice shaky. "You've changed." He looked at her for a moment, his eyes calm and steady. Then he smiled faintly and said, "No, Sierra. I just became the man you didn't believe I could be." The words landed softly, but they hit her harder than any insult could. She tried to speak again, but her voice caught in her throat. Around them, people were laughing and talking, unaware of the small, private moment taking place between two people who once shared everything. Sierra's eyes filled with tears. She blinked fast, hoping no one would notice, but a single tear slipped down her cheek. "I didn't know," she whispered, but stopped herself. What could she possibly say now? That she regretted it? That she wished she'd stayed? None of it would matter. Evan didn't say anything more. He gave a polite nod, then turned his attention back to a colleague who had called his name from across the table. He didn't look back. Sierra stood there for a few seconds, feeling the weight of silence between them. The man who once waited for her texts, who once tried to make her smile, now treated her like a memory, something that had happened, but no longer mattered. She quietly turned and walked out of the ballroom, her reflection flickering across the mirrored walls as she passed. Outside, the cool night air hit her face, mixing with the warmth of her tears. For the first time, she didn't feel angry or bitter. She just felt empty. That night, she realized that some goodbyes don't come with shouting or drama. Sometimes, they arrive as calm truth, and by the time you understand it, it's already too late. That night, after the charity dinner, Evan drove home through the quiet streets of Austin. The city lights reflected off the windshield, but his mind was calm. He wasn't thinking about Sierra anymore. There was no anger left, no pain. Just a quiet understanding that everything had unfolded exactly as it needed to. When he reached home, the warm light from the kitchen spilled across the driveway. Natalie was there, sitting on the couch with her laptop open, her hair tied back, and a cup of tea in her hand. She looked up and smiled the moment she saw him. "You're late," she teased softly. "Got caught up talking to a few people," Evan said, setting his keys down. "The event went well." She closed her laptop and stood, walking over to him. "I saw the photos online already. You looked like you were running the place." He laughed, shaking his head. "Just doing my part." She reached for 2 glasses and poured a bit of champagne. "Then we should celebrate. The plaza project's finished, the firm's growing, and you, Mr. Mercer, are officially someone worth toasting." They clinked glasses and sat together. The night felt peaceful, almost sacred. There was no need for fancy words or big gestures, just quiet comfort and understanding. After a moment, Natalie asked, "You okay? You seem deep in thought." Evan looked at her and smiled faintly. "Yeah, I just saw someone from my past tonight." Natalie didn't pry. She simply nodded, trusting him enough to let him share on his own. He continued, "It reminded me of something she once said, that she needed someone who could support her lifestyle." He paused, staring at the soft bubbles rising in his glass. "Back then, I thought that meant I wasn't enough. But now I realize, I just needed someone who could support my soul." Natalie smiled gently. "I think you found her." Evan looked at her, warmth spreading in his chest. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think I have." They sat together for a long while, talking about their next project, their plans for the future, and their dream to expand the scholarship program. Every word felt easy, real, and rooted in something honest, the kind of life Evan had once only imagined. Later, as the night deepened, Evan stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched before him, calm, steady, alive. He thought back to the man he had been 2 years ago, uncertain, heartbroken, trying to understand why love had turned so cold. Now, he saw that the heartbreak had been a beginning, not an ending. Behind him, Natalie called softly, "You coming to bed?" He turned, smiled, and said, "Yeah, I'm coming." As he closed the balcony door, a quiet peace settled over him. There was no need for revenge, no bitterness left to hold on to. He had already won, not by proving Sierra wrong, but by becoming someone better. Sometimes, Evan thought, the sweetest kind of revenge isn't loud or cruel. It's simply living a life so full of peace that the past no longer has any power over you. And that was exactly what he intended to do.